Okay, boys and girls, so yesterday you read this text, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. And in that discussion board post, you were paying really close attention to this diagram, which we know is the inside of that Trieste. And then you were looking at this diagram, which we said is actually a timeline of that journey down to the bottom of the sea and then their return back to surface. So let's take a closer look at this diagram and think about, why the author might have included this. What was the author's purpose or reason for including this in the text? So the first thing we're looking at now, right away I noticed that really the purpose of this diagram, in my opinion, is to show you what the inside of this watercraft looks like. So I can see the different parts here, the gondola, the window, this is like the observation area. And then I can see the major part of this watercraft here. And then right up here where people enter. Now when I look at the diagram, I think the purpose really is to show me what all of these parts look like and where they're located. So I might say something like the diagram on page 363 shows the inside of the, and I want to make sure I spell it correctly because it's right here throughout the entire text, shows the inside of the Trieste and where all the parts are located. Now, it's also telling me information that connects to what I've read up here in the text, right? It says here that they were jammed in the observation gondola, and that was Picard and Walsh, right? The space was so small that they could barely move, but they were ready. Then I go down here and I can see, okay, so they must have climbed in through this entrance tunnel, come down here, and this is where they're seated, right inside here in the observation gondola, and they're looking out this window right here so that they can see. After all, they are traveling down to the very bottom of the Mariana Trench, so they're making observations of what they see down there. So what else did I read up here that connects to the diagram? Well, I read that water from the ocean filled the water ballast tanks. I also learned that at 340 feet, they released gasoline, letting more water fill the tanks instead. And why did they do that? Because I learned that water weighs more than gasoline, so it makes that craft, this whole, I don't know, you wouldn't really call it a ship, but they never really called it a submarine either, this watercraft. It's going to make it sink farther and farther down into the ocean. So then I go down here.
My water!
You can hear Bryn chiming in. So what I see down here in the diagram is that here's that water ballast tank that they're mentioning that they filled with water, and here's the gasoline. So I'm guessing maybe water overflowed from this ballast tank into this one, and then into this one, and then into this chamber, and then even into parts of this chamber and this chamber. And so the water continues flowing in to make this thing heavier and heavier so that it continues to sink. After all, they are going down into the deepest part of the ocean where no one has really traveled before. So I might say something like the diagram helps show the water ballast tanks that continue to fill to lower the craft further into the water. It also helps the reader understand the, let's see, what do we want to say about that gondola? Understand the limited amount of space inside the observation gondola. This part was used to observe the ocean floor in the Mariana Trench. I think that's really the purpose of this diagram right here, is really just to give you a better understanding of really what the inside of this craft looks like and how they were able to sink further down. Again, for me personally, when I take the time to slow down and really think about, okay, what am I seeing here in this diagram? And I kind of do this like back and forth, going from the diagram to the text. Why do I do it? Because now I understand all of this, guys. Before I just read through this, and yeah, I had a pretty good understanding of the text, but now I know a lot more about how they were able to sink further and further down after that water, which now I know weighs more than gasoline, continued to fill each of these pockets inside this craft. The next diagram that we want to look at is right here. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit, and we learned that this is actually a timeline. So let me add in another post-it note here, and we're going to kind of switch right over to here, and I can get rid of this one for now. And now we're talking about the diagram, and I'm going to put /timeline on page 364, shows the journey to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. But now let's think, what really is this showing us? Well, at 8 a.m. it looks like they get in, the door is shut, the water floods the ballast, and they begin traveling downward. At 350 feet, they release the gasoline. So they need more and more water to fill this craft, so they continue to sink. So at 2,400 feet, the men change into dry clothing and eat some chocolate. Well, I don't know, I'm making an inference, but if you did that, I would assume like all is well on the Trieste. It's about 10 a.m. and they're still descending downward. Now at 12 p.m., that's right around lunchtime, right? They're 32,400 feet. They hear an explosion. Now that could indicate trouble, just in my opinion. So the diagram helps the reader understand each part of the trip. In the morning, everything seemed fine, and they continued downward until 12 o'clock p.m. when they heard an explosion. Now, I might go back to the text and think, what was it that happened and how were they feeling at that point? Well, it wasn't until later, then they hear their last message on the wireless part after they've reached bottom, right? They finally reach bottom and then they don't hear any more messages, again indicating some problems. They then realize, because I know back in the text I learned that they indicate what made that noise. It was a cracked window. Now they're becoming a little bit more worried about their safety. So once they reach bottom and begin traveling back to the surface, they realize, or they become more worried. And that's how it connects to the text. So the diagram shows that at, let's see, before 2 o'clock, they then release all of these lead pellets so that they can begin to ascend, which means to travel back up. That at just before 2 o'clock p.m., they release the lead pellets so that they can travel up. We can say upward. And then finally, here at 6 p.m., well, just before 6 p.m., they resurface. So it says right here in the text, if I want to be specific, at 5 p.m. they emerged. they hadn't heard anything from them for hours, so people above really didn't know what to think. So the last part might be that the diagram shows that the men emerged just before 6 p.m. So again, guys, I have now a much better idea of their voyage, traveling all the way down to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, just because I took a few extra moments and really tried to connect what this timeline or diagram is showing me to what I read in the text. Again, guys, good readers, they take the time to do this. I'm hoping that as we move forward, when you encounter an informational text with nonfiction text features, that you will take just a few extra moments to really relate what the author is showing you in that text feature to the information they provided in the text. Let me know if you guys have any questions.